about masculinity and femininity and everything in between, gender roles, all those kind of things. So, Derek, I got to ask a question. What is the definition of masculinity? So we know where we're at.
Well, I think it's important to start off our roots with kind of the classical definition of masculinity and femininity as as it pertained to society before where we are today. So throughout history in general, 30,000 foot view, there in most societies has been masculinity and femininity as a way of divvying up responsibilities in a society. And masculinity usually, fell on the males, and it was anything that had to do with security and strength and courage, going to war and fighting for your family or society, building, doing laborious jobs, hunting, just the general things you associate with strength and protection and macho. Whereas femininity, on the other hand, was more about the family and nurturing and caring for the home, and focusing more on emotion versus rational decisions. And this is, like I said, this is historically what I think we're going to talk more about today. I just think it's important to remember that, and there's important reasons to have both of those different roles in society, and having those roles, I think, biologically affected the way men and women evolved over time, because for thousands of years, women cared for the family and weren't expected to do as much of the physical activity as men were expected to do. So that's the foundation of masculinity and femininity. And in my opinion, I think those roles are still just as important now, in different ways. I mean, maybe, it's not like we're all having to hunt and go to war and stuff nowadays, since technology and peace have become things. But I think a lot of those roles, like protection and strength and law and order, as well as family values and nurture and emotional strength, I think they're all really important now. But it's totally changed the dynamic of men and women taking on these roles and to the extent of which roles are taken. But I also think that some people have kind of taken it too far with modern masculinity and femininity. So there's, in a nutshell, my thoughts on like what it is, to be masculine or to be feminine.
Yeah, and I mean, even you can trace masculinity and things like that back to the beginning of human society. I mean, the whole idea was the hunter gatherer was the men have the responsibility of being the strong of the partnership and going out and providing and hunting and doing all these things. And of course, as we should, a society has definitely evolved. And I think where we are, I agree with you that there are certain issues to masculinity now, and there's obviously that beautiful phrase of toxic masculinity. I'm not a fan of
there are issues. I don't think there are issues with masculinity. I just think it's evolved.
No. I'll clear that up. What I was saying was, obviously there's some people that take it to the extreme, is what you said. So I want to clear that up. And okay. Yeah, and I totally get with you on that, and I want to point out I do not like the phrase toxic masculinity. I think it exists, but I just don't like it. But yeah, for me, masculinity is I love the fact that it's just so different now, because I don't think I would have fit into the rules and the societal norms of masculinity when my dad was around, because I just don't, you know what I mean? I think that
I think that's you're a product of the generation you live in as well, where you'd be a completely different person if you were raised in a different time. So I think that's kind of hard to say. I do think so. I think that it was basically, if I had to guess, like the start of the Industrial Revolution is probably when it really started to change like where the need for the man playing the masculine role and the woman playing the feminine role, like where that changed a little bit, because we got to the point where with mass production and a free market, that you don't have to do all the things that families used to have to do. Thousands of years ago, you're responsible for getting all the food and for building your house and like taking care of everything. You had more roles that you had to divvy up between your team as a family. Whereas now, like the family isn't as important as it used to be, for better or worse, and there's not nearly as much of a need for big manly men all the time. So yeah, I think that for a lot of people, that's probably is a good thing. It's easier for people to kind of choose how they want to act and be in society.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. There's just a really good quote that there was in an article from Capable Men. I thought I said man. CapableMen.com. There's actually a quote in one of the articles about masculinity that was from David Finkner, or from Chuck. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. From the book Fight Club, where it says, quote, "We're designed to be hunters, and we're in a society of shopping. There's nothing to kill anymore. There's nothing to fight. Nothing to overcome, nothing to explore, and that society emasculation, every man is born." So there's not we're not in a war. We're not in a need for soldiers. We're not in a need for fighting. We're not in a need for this, primal need for these things that men have. And it's it's scientific even. I mean, it's testosterone is what it is. And we're in this weird stage of life where we don't need that anymore. And that's not to say that we don't need men like that or we need people like that. And I also want to kind of talk about like.
Well, I want to say it's not. We don't need it in the same way that we needed it before.
No, it needs to change.
I still do think that we need protection. We need builders still. There's still people in construction. There still are soldiers in the military that need to be strong. I think that nowadays, especially with more gender fluidity, which we'll get more into our next serious topic we do will probably be that. I think that the roles can be split between men and women a little bit more, and it's more acceptable in society. And I don't think that the approach should be to call masculinity toxic. If a guy's being an a-hole, that's one thing. If a guy is using his strength to hurt women or to put them down because he's physically stronger than them, then that's absolutely wrong. And I don't think that's masculinity as much as that guy's an ass.
That's cowardice. That's different.
Yeah,
and that's cowardice. That's not masculinity. And what I was saying was, I think with how masculinity evolves and changes, I think masculinity, being manly, and saying my dad's generation, maybe before that, maybe baby boomers before that, stuff like that, masculinity, just on a societal sense, men weren't supposed to cry. Men weren't supposed to share their feelings. And they would get ostracized for it. And where now we're supposed to have a wide spectrum of emotion because that's just being a human being. I think like what I'm trying to say is with masculinity now, I think we're more in touch with who we are, and we're accepting of it's okay to cry at a sad movie or something when something sad happens. It's okay to like something that might be a little bit more feminine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I agree. Like you just went to Shania Twain for the second time in 2 months.
And I had a great time.
Totally okay. And I completely agree with you there that it's good that men are more willing to share emotions and to be more accepting of what they feel. I do think there's a line where people to take it too far, then maybe, I don't know how to say, like exaggerate emotions or just become way too dramatic. And I think that, especially when it comes to like decision making, politically or in your life or in relationships. I think that there should be a balance between rational decisions and emotional decisions where you have to take both into account. And I think that kind of goes back to the old version of masculinity and femininity and how they balance each other out. Is that the old femininity was the emotional part of the decision that had to do with the family, and masculinity was more of the rational, like moving to find the next source of food.
Which is totally opposite about my relationship. Ashley is the one that's logical and thinks these things out, and I'm the more emotional type.
True. and I think that's totally okay. And I think that like that's the cool thing about where we're at in society now is that we can kind of mix and match some of the traits. You find the partner that balances you out. And the thing that I think is important to know is that it's still okay for a man to be manly.
Absolutely.
Like if that's the way, like I enjoy working out and being strong. I enjoy, doing physical labor. I love sports and competition and things like that. I also love chick flicks, rom-coms. I'm all about it. And I think that like, I don't think that I should be looked at, as like a misogynist or something because I love being strong and being a provider in a relationship and a protector.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. I mean, there was a time, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, I went with one of my friends to chop some wood. That was the most manliest thing I'd experienced in a long time. And it was so much, it's fun. There's nothing wrong with shooting guns or chopping wood or, like you said, working out, doing these really manly things. I think you should do them. I think there absolutely is, that's the thing is, it's you can have a tenderness and you can be in touch with your emotions, but at the same time, it's totally okay to crack open a cold one with the boys and drink beer and, do whatever, just have a good time.
I think sometimes people conflate me wanting to be manly and do manly things and being okay with that. And people conflate that with me saying that women can't do that. And that, that's not my feeling at all. If a woman wants to do more masculine things, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that's where we're at in society, where people are just more accepting of do what you want, whatever's going to float your own boat as long as it doesn't sink mine. Just understand that some people are going to be more masculine, some people are going to be more feminine. And oftentimes it's good to have the dichotomy in general, even though it's more mix and match than it's ever been before.
We should have just named this podcast "You Can Have Both," because we said this. We said this in the religious episode, the religion episode, where we said science and religion can work. You can have both. It's the same thing. You can have this more modern masculinity, and you can still have those old school values. You're exactly right. You can have both. They can coexist. For whatever reason, our society is at this stage where we're so accepting of a lot of things, but then we think because we tolerate things or accept things, we have to get rid of the other thing. No, they can work together.
It's as if, you're in a big boat and it was tipping one way, non-acceptance and gender roles in a problematic way where you're forcing people into positions that they don't want to be in. And so then everybody ran to the other side of the boat. And now we got to get to the point where we're in the middle. It's okay. You can have relationships that are very old school traditional relationships where the man works and does, his manly protection duties and physical labor, and the woman stays at home and takes care of the kids and cooks and cleans. There's nothing wrong with having that situation if both people in it want to do that.
And you know what else?
There's nothing wrong with the exact reverse being true too,
Yeah, exactly. And here's another thing that's going to probably blow some people's minds that are too old school. Gay men can be very manly too. And I think that's also a negative or something that people think that can't exist, that masculinity only exists for straight men. No, gay men can be masculine as well. It's very much a moving thing.
Yeah, and I think that there's because of hormones and testosterone and our physical makeup and the history, like I mentioned in the beginning, where masculinity and femininity come from and how that affected our genetic makeup going forward, that a heterosexual male, cisgender male, is probably going to be more likely to be more masculine than a heterosexual cisgender female or heterosexual or a homosexual male, just because of their genetic makeup. But that doesn't, it's not like an absolute thing.
Yeah, and it's
like an odds game.
It's not only and it's like we said, there is a science to it, but with everything, there's also personality. I mean, there's tomboys, there's straight women that are into fishing and hunting and into more manly things. It's totally possible. So,
and our lesson, just like it always is, don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't shut down people's opinion, and be accepting of everybody as long as they aren't actively hurting you or someone else.
Yeah, man, we're all in this together. We're all experiencing this together. So I want to kind of we touched on it a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit more about this before we get to femininity. So toxic masculinity. I want, like we were saying, we've been trying to stress to be clear. I don't think that toxic masculinity means that men are evil. I don't think that's kind of the intention. But I think it's back to what we're saying, where you can have the core masculine values, but don't be a dick. Is essentially what they're saying. And you're a coward. You're not a man if you sexually harass and assault women. That's just not being a man. That's not being masculine. That's just something we want to make very clear. Being a man, being manly is totally different than being a jerk. Totally different things. So now let's kind of define. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's just a final note on toxic masculinity. I just think that it's dangerous to use that, because it's kind of the term wasn't even around, I don't think, until like 2008. It's a newer term, but it's coming from feminist scholars is where it originated, and it's a way to say, that men by being men and having certain advantages in society, wrong or right, because just by being who they are hurting females. By being masculine, that you're hurting women. And I just think I don't think that's the correct approach in solving any problems by blaming somebody else. It's more of, if there's problems in workplaces, you should fight on the actual issues that are if there's sexual harassment, fight against sexual harassment. Don't just lump it in and conflate it with masculinity, because I don't think, like you said, that's sexual harassment is not okay, and that's not masculine. That's just wrong.
Right. It gives a combative tone to what you're trying to talk about, and that's never good. When right out of the gate, you have to be defensive about something.
Yeah, exactly. That's not how you solve problems.